Welcome back to America's Forum, an invigorating discussion with our friend Josh Orton of Progressives United, who remains with us via Skype from Madison, Wisconsin. Josh, thanks. And no efforts to impugn your integrity, even though we may challenge from time to time the situational point of view you might put forth. But it's always good to have your insights and point of view from the left. Let me just ask you this. A lot of people write into us here, and I made the point during my days in Congress, why not enforce existing laws on the books? That seems to me would be a departure for the better in terms of this question of our porous borders and all the national security implications therein. Why not enforce existing law?
Well, I think there's a couple questions here that we can unpack. The first is what needs to be done and what's the problem? At base, I would argue that we have a huge problem of folks who are hiding in the shadows. It's a problem in terms of crime. It's a problem in terms of our workforce. It's a problem in terms of, the sort of Damocles hanging over these people in terms of deportation. And I think that, Republicans have long argued about securing the border first. I hear Republican senators say, well, before we address comprehensive immigration reform, we have to go back and look at the idea of securing the border. JD, like I said, you were from a border state. I'm not sure how many billions and billions of dollars we can keep pouring in to border measures before Republicans are willing to say, okay, let's actually deal with the root problem here. My cynical side says that no matter how much money we put into border protection, Republicans are still not going to be willing to come to the table. And once again, we're going to be Charlie Brown trying to kick the football that Republican Lucy is going to pull away.
Well, now, we can use the analogy to peanuts, but we don't mean to turn this into a comic strip. Let me go back to a figure of speech you used earlier. People, quote, hiding in the shadows. Josh, I'd be hard-pressed to find anybody hiding in the shadows, whether it's Phoenix, Arizona, the capital city of that border state, or Madison, Wisconsin, where you join us from, or Washington, D.C. We have seen so many illegals celebrating their illegality. We have seen this government, sadly under Republican presidents, I'll tell you what typifies it. We actually got countervailing advice from different groups when it came to use of the matricula consular, the card given Mexican Americans in the United States from the different Mexican consulates. The FBI said, do not honor that card because it would bring about the whole notion of identity theft, and it would be very difficult if we sanctioned the card. Meantime, financial institutions said, welcome that matricula consular card. So I will admit to you that neither the right nor the left speaks as a monolith on the issue, but the notion that people are, quote, hiding in the shadows, nice figure of speech, it's not a reality.
Well, I haven't seen too many illegal block parties. I haven't seen much celebration of undocumented status. But I think let's take a look at things on the ground. I think we can all agree that there are families here that are undocumented, whole families that are working. There's parents and there's children. Let's look at some of the things that happens to normal families. A child gets sick. A wife is in an abusive relationship. Some people need to call the police. These families, these mothers, these fathers, these children are always thinking twice before they reach out for the normal services, for the police, for healthcare, to leave an abusive relationship that Americans would take for granted. That's what living in the shadows means. And that kind of pain, that kind of almost existential problem is really sort of the heart of what I think a lot of these groups who are challenging President Obama to take executive action that's what they're really talking about.
Well, it is interesting to hear those on the left try to define this. For example, family unification, the notion that families would be torn asunder if the law fails to be enforced. Well, family unification doesn't have to take place in the United States, does it?
Well, but there are people in the United States right now. We're not playing sort of hopscotch here. I think that, the reality on the ground, and, look, I remember just a few months ago when I heard Republicans talking about how it was practical and affordable and reasonable to try and deport 12 million people. I'm not sure if that's your position or if that's the position of Republicans still, but, I think there's a difference between living in the reality of people working as families here in the United States and living in the political fantasy world where we can spend unlimited amounts of money to sort of please our political base.
Well,
I think that we have to sort of come together and acknowledge what the facts are.
Josh, in the real world, unfortunately, we are governed by time. 40 seconds remain. Let me just offer this thought to you. It is not fantasy to enforce existing law. It is not fantasy to enforce the borders because national security is border security. What is sheer fantasy is to suggest that, well, we can devote billions of dollars to the care and maintenance of what essentially becomes a curious kind of underclass, protected in some ways, but then a failure to accommodate them in other ways. That is the pressing problem we face. But Josh, as always, we appreciate your input, and America's Forum continues.